So again, I want to wish you all a happy Labab Duchen. It's sort of the Buddhist Mother's Day. Lord Buddha went to Tushita Heaven, is it? And taught his mother and liberated her, which, according to all Jewish mothers, we're really happy about that. That is a celebration that we can really get behind. Never forget your mother. So today is especially wonderful because I think our country and perhaps our world has a little bit of celebrating to do as well. I would say the worm has turned. So we the people have the right to celebrate and to be grateful. And what I really like about that is that gratitude is a tremendous, tremendous feeling and emotion or inner movement. I would say one of the most powerful that one can have. And why is that? Because even though it's not the one that makes you jump up and down and have emotion, actually that kind of rabid emotion tends to get us more inflamed and more habituated and more in trouble. But gratitude is a wonderful, wonderful emotion or feeling, whatever you'd like to call it, because it opens doors. It opens doors. Gratitude tends to be free of judgment. Not stupid free of judgment, where one can't contemplate or think or make up one's mind, but there is an openness there with a sense of gratitude. Lately, I've been teaching a little bit wrathfully to my beautiful Sangha. And they're all black and blue if you look under their robes. Sort of beaten to a pulp. And I haven't exactly laid off the lay Sangha either, so. But today we're not doing that. Today we're going to talk about gratitude. I feel really good about that. I'm in the mood. When we think about our opportunity that we have here, it's easy to start feeling guilty, especially when your teacher nags at you, constantly saying, 20 years, and what have you done? Okay, that's all I'm going to do, I promise. It's been 20 years now. So, it's easy to feel guilty, and then, hopefully if we've had any teaching at all, we don't hang out in guilt very long, because as I've tried to teach many times, that's somebody else's emotion. We don't specialize in guilt around here. We go for remorse. So immediately when you feel guilty, go straight to remorse and hang out there for just a brief time, long enough to work it. Remorse is a good thing. It's an eye-opener. It's a self-awareness thing. It's like a directional compass in some ways. If one makes a mistake and feels like no longer grounded, no longer going in the right direction, no longer sure of what's happening inside your brain, sometimes it's really good to take account, and whether that account comes from your teacher on the outside, or whether it comes from, hopefully, your own inner practice, where you can look at your mind and say, some work to do here. 20 years, still same poisons. So we hope that eventually in our practice we come to terms with that and go right past guilt into confession. Confession is very healthy. The difference between guilt and confession is that guilt stays inside like a cancer and has a warping effect. It closes doors. It doesn't open any doors. And remorse, on the other hand, is like, I hate to sound so graphic, but it's a little bit like a bloodletting. To get the old blood out and let the new blood circulate, if you were thinking of perhaps a wound, let's say, if that was the analogy. To get the old blood out, and this way the wound can properly heal deeply from the bottom layer to the top layer. And that's how we use remorse. We don't like to hang out in anything, because hopefully we've taken to heart some of the Buddhist teachings, which include renunciation. Not only renunciation of materiality and five poisons and ego clinging and all that kind of stuff, but even such inner events as guilt. If they're not handy, if they're not useful, if they don't move you forward, we renounce them. We've learned on this path what to accept and what to reject. So it's all about growing. It's all about walking the path and making it happen for you. Walking your walk. Walking your talk. When we use some sort of confessional practice, and of course we all know that the best, the one that is given to us is just a Christmas gift, if you'll wait. Okay, a gift. That little cultural dance is funny, isn't it? So we have this gift, and Vajrasattva is an extraordinary practice, an extraordinary gift. And once we isolate that, yes, we have some problems, and indeed our behavior has gone downhill, or even our mind has gone downhill, perhaps our inner focus as a Buddhist practitioner, or even as a general person walking the path, has gone a little bit downhill or remains unsteady, we can dig right into Vajrasattva, and we have the technology, therefore, to fix what's wrong. Even if thoughts that we're not particularly proud of have prevailed in our mind, and even if indeed they have come out of our mouths, still Vajrasattva is the fix and is the method that is helpful. The very, excuse me, the frog lives. The very seed syllables that are in the Vajrasattva mantra, both the 100-syllable mantra and the condensed version, these seed syllables are purification, kind of like medicines, energy medicines that one can think of. And each one is an antidote to what has come before it, including non-virtuous speech and habit. Vajrasattva is something to be particularly grateful for, because we are human, and we are revolving here in samsara. Until we achieve supreme liberation, we're going to make mistakes. We're going to make regrettable utterances and have regrettable thoughts, and maybe even take some regrettable turns. Here on Lapab Duchen, we can celebrate the fact that all has remedy to it. All can be remedied. And that's the great blessing of Vajrasattva. So, on this path, not only are we able to fall off the horse, climb back on again, and repair whatever broken samaya there might be, but we have the opportunity to learn from our mistakes and to do all of that in one lifetime. That's kind of how Vajrayana works. We don't get to just space out. We have to take a certain remedy, or we begin to see that changes have occurred on our path. And so it's very useful to pick up the remedy and actually work it. What have we got to be grateful for? Well, other than last Tuesday. Still partying. We must understand how rare it is to have this opportunity, and how difficult it is, really. One thing we know from a material point of view if we have rare and beautiful, precious objects, eventually they come to own us rather than ourselves owning them. A marvelous car, a marvelous house, marvelous things, whatever they are, eventually we become so absorbed in them that they kind of own us. And really, it's not till we practice some renunciation or we come to the end of our very lives that we realize we've wasted so much time on so much ordinary dumbness, just craziness, and run after so many goals that just brought us down to blind alleys and left us in the lurch. But in Vajrayana, we have something to practice, something to celebrate that is very meaningful. First of all, we are taught from the Buddha's teachings that this precious human rebirth is extremely difficult to obtain. Well, when we first hear that, we say, well, not so. I mean, there's about 6 billion of us. But then if you really look at it, the Buddha has taught that there are at least 6 definable realms of cyclic existence with many manifestations and many forms of life in every realm. Take, for instance, one that we can see with our eyes, the animal realm. We've been told that there are animals, and when we look around, we can see that there are animals. And depending on how deeply we look, we can see that there are uncountable different forms of animals, uncountable different amounts of each kind of animal. And so the number 6 billion becomes rather meaningless when you think that there could be 6 billion cockroaches in one house alone. And there are so many different life forms, they are just endless. In our lives, we think about how we come into contact with certain kinds of animal life forms. We know about dogs, we know about cats, we know about birds, we know about mice, we know about cockroaches, we know about ants, we know about flies, we know about mosquitoes. But staying in our little area leaves us asleep to the many, many, many life forms that there are that we have never touched base with or had in our minds. Like, for instance, perhaps we've heard that there are whales, but never having actually seen one. They're like meaningless to us. Their state of mind, their culture, their methods of being, their interactions with one another. We are blind to that, and they have no meaning to us other than just a noun. Or perhaps we've heard a little of their sound and thought, oh, that's wondrous. But we still have not understood that there are amazing life forms in the realms of cyclic existence. Regarding humans, there may be 6 billion of us, but how many of us are actually experiencing a precious human rebirth? Well, in order to know that, we have to define precious human rebirth. There are many humans, but maybe there are some whose mental faculties are not complete, who perhaps cannot learn Dharma, cannot read, cannot enjoy themselves, and in many cases, a person may be perfectly intelligent, but their behavioral choices are quite limited because of some mental affectation, perhaps a mental condition of some sort, maybe a depression, or maybe some neuroses or something that keeps us tied up in our little boxes, where we're too scared to come out of them. And so a person like that may not have the same kinds of human life experiences that you do. And then if we have ever traveled to other countries, and increasingly we can see this in our country as well, there are the poor. The poor don't have the same opportunity that we have. I mean, theoretically they could, but it's only theoretical. It's very hard to think about one's spiritual future when the hunger pains in the stomach are so bad, there's not a moment's peace. Or it's very bad to think about practicing virtuous methods and ridding ourselves of unfortunate habitual tendencies when we live in Darfur and we're likely to be killed or raped again, not, of course you only get killed once, but raped again, or beaten or have limbs cut off. It's really hard to have the space in one's mind to think the way we do as we sit in our celestial palace mandala. And so, yes, indeed, we have fortunate human rebirths. I think about, I can't stop thinking about what's broke over in the Mideast and what it really looks like now. I think about the country of Iraq, and every time you see it, there's no light, there's no food, there's no nothing. It's not as good as we would be led to believe. And yet we're supposed to be bringing them the higher way. We're supposed to be bringing them democracy. What we've brought is suffering. And what we need to understand that even if we're trying to make good choices, even if we are well intended in some fashion, if we don't have teachings that lead us to true virtue and a true method that allows for change in our minds and our hearts, then little change will happen. Because change is always individual. We absolutely go nowhere if we blame anybody out there for what's happening either to us or anywhere. Because then if we continue to happily blame others, we find that there's no opportunity in that. There's nothing but closed doors there. No way to change anything. We become helpless and hapless. Just, that's it. End of story. So blame is not the way, but methodology is. If I were going to look for a methodology, I would look for a methodology that has nothing to do with war and hate. Now that would be a no-brainer to me, If I were looking for a path to practice or a faith to fill my heart, I would look for something without the hatred. In fact, I would look for something that never started a war, that is based on doing no harm, that is based on awakening to the equality of all that lives. And in my life, I have found that to be the Buddhist teaching. Buddhists don't go to war. We don't believe it will do any good. Buddhists don't fight or kill because we know in the end it will come back to us. Buddhists don't engage in hate because we know it's a cancer. And we know it not only infects the people, but it infects us as well. And so we know a few things, we've learned a few things, and I feel grateful for that. I think about what's happening to the world now, and then I look at the Buddha's teachings and I think, Maho, Maho. Because the Buddha's teachings are like a mirror. They say that we must walk the path of non-violence. Indeed, we must go beyond non-violence and walk the path of not causing any harm in any way to any other being, whether it be a human being or any other sentient being. That means being that feels. So one of the first commitments that we make on the path is not to cause suffering. That's a good reason to be grateful. To be connected with such a way of thinking, to be on such a path, This is beautiful and valuable. I don't know, a short time ago it seemed like we all thought, yes, we've got this little thing, and we've got this little path, and it's, yes, peace begins with me, and yes, I can practice like that, but how are we going to move this big rock that seems to have appeared in the world? You know, are we going to get behind it and shove? What's going to happen? It seems as though violence has completely taken over the world. It seems as though it's disrupting in so many ways that non-virtue is the soup du jour, you know? It's what everybody consumes and what everybody makes. But maybe we saw this week, when people of like mind gather together, their voices can be heard. When people who have some similar intention and some good thought come together, they can make a difference. I think that's worth celebrating. This precious human rebirth is extremely difficult to obtain. Even though we may have seemingly the qualities to engage in the path of Dharma, and there's really not enough time to go through the many methods and teachings that we've heard already that teach us ways to recognize that there are some things to accept and some things to reject. That here on this path of Dharma, there are thoughts that we can hold to, and there are things that we must simply put aside. For instance, our own ego clinging and our own pride. It does us no good, and it causes us distress. It causes us distress. And in the end, there's no nutrition in it. It's empty calories, and it's harmful. Sort of like garbage food, you know? It's kind of like that. Does it feed the spirit? Does it feed the mind? No. Takes it down, closes doors, removes opportunities, makes it difficult to practice. And so we think that even though we have these necessary capabilities in order to practice Dharma, we have eyes, we have ears, we have faculties that are fairly complete, now we have to go to the next level. We have to look a little more deeply and a little more subtly into our own minds and say, then, having been on this path for this long, how is it that I have not made even more progress? And at that point we get to examine, well, perhaps pride is the difficulty here. Or perhaps ego clinging is the difficulty here. Or perhaps competition, that sense of needing to be right. That's a downfall for so many of us. So many of us, well, you know, we don't really care how an argument or a statement or an event ends up so long as we're right and prove to be right, so we get to be on top. That's a real difficulty on the path. Better to be humble. Better to be quiet and to go aside and to think. And to meditate on one's own qualities and to see. It's not like somebody's going to beat you up if you're wrong. It's not like there's an old man on a throne out there floating around getting ready to hit you over the head with a baseball bat if you're wrong. It's simply that cause brings result. We call that karma, but you don't have to make it that fancy. It's that cause brings result. And one can see that in many different forms, from the scientific to the subtle. So, once we've decided that this is a precious human rebirth, we have to honor that. And the way to honor that is to not stop just thinking, oh, I'm good enough, I've heard some teaching, I've met the teacher, I have some auspicious conditions, and I can recite some things, and I have a few skills here. You can't stop there. You have to go deeper into it, deeper into one's practice, richer with your practice. Have it be, in other words, Rather than you have your practice be one single note, let it be a chorus. Let it be rich and deep and profound. A symphony, even better than that. Rich and deep and moving. Moving of obstacles, moving of non-virtue, moving it right out the door. So the depth to which we practice. And I know this is an issue because sometimes I look in, and it can be the same person at different times. I'll look in the eyes of one of my students and I'll go, oh, the light's on. Something's going on in there. Hello. I like that. And then I'll look at the same student the next year or whatever. Could be the next minute. And I'll go, whoa, checked out. Checked out. Somebody's not home. So this is an option that, and a power that we have every moment. Yeah, we have this precious human rebirth, but how deep are we taking it? Are we using it? And then I think about being able to use the path as a tool. One, again, cannot practice superficially, has to practice more deeply. We have to honor that commitment and that opportunity by transforming our bodies to Vajra bodies, transforming our speech to Vajra speech, transforming our minds to Vajra mind. And that means, in a way, you're never satisfied. I mean, that's the beautiful thing. That's one place to put your dissatisfaction that makes it a beautiful thing. Is on the path. You can say, and you can know, I always want to do more. I always want to go deeper. I always want to learn more. I'd like to find out how I've been wrong all this time so that I can correct my course. There's no shame in that. That's beautiful. It's beautiful to have that kind of courage. And what's beautiful about the path is that it gives you a way to do that where you don't have to parade it around in public. You can just quietly go into your prayer room and correct your course. And that's the depth of it. That's what's marvelous about it. And of course we can practice not only in a deep way, but in a heartfelt way. In a heartfelt way. Regarding transforming this body, this speech, this mind, this appearance to the triple Vajra, we could start perhaps with the capability of speech. Speech and mind, of course, are quite connected. In fact, we forget that, and therein lies the rub. Sometimes the mouth engages before the mind motor's turned on. We're just running off at the seams there. And therein we get into trouble. But our speech, in its truth and its nature, is like a holy Vajra, pure, upright, pristine, and as strong as a powerful Vajra. The nature of our voice is the seed syllable ah. The nature of all that appears, of everything that appears from the absolute primordial nature that is the void or the great Dharmadhatu is ah. That is the nature. And so our Vajra speech in truth is ah. That's hard to understand. Each time we recite mantra, the nature of this throat that we think is so ordinary and these vocal cords becomes transformed into its Vajra capability. And that is ah, the primordial wisdom expression of both emptiness and form is ah. And the other night as I was going to sleep, I was sort of contemplating. I like to do that as I'm going to sleep. And when the mind is relaxed and everything's quiet and my dogs are snoring. During those special quiet moments, those of you that have Pekingese or have seen them know. I was laying there and I was thinking, if I could say one thing, if I had the opportunity to speak once, one time, to every person in the world, if they would just file by, and I could say just one thing to them, what would it be? I would say, Om Ahkon Benzar Guru Pema Siddhi Hum. Because beyond the Vajra Guru mantra, nothing else is necessary. It is perfect speech, perfect mind, and perfect body. It is Om, perfect body, Ah, perfect speech, Hum, perfect mind. Benzar Guru, Pema Siddhi Hum. The Vajra Guru, the Guru Rinpoche, the precious Guru, our own root Guru, he who emanates from the very Pema family, grant me your blessings. That's what that mantra means. By the power of perfected Vajra of body, speech, and mind, precious Guru who emanates perfectly from the Lotus family, grant me your powers. That is the meaning of that mantra. There's so many things we could say to each other. I mean, there's so many things we could inquire about, so many things we could explain to each other. And I think about all the conversations that we have every day, even just the hello, goodbye conversations, or the issues, especially the issues, the conversations we have in our heads. Oh, issues. Wasted syllables, stupid goulash of nonsense. When what we could say, what we are empowered to say, is Om Ahkon Benzar Guru Pema Siddhi Hum. And I know that may not seem like a very deep thought to you, but that very night that I was falling asleep thinking that night I had a dream of Guru Rinpoche, and he spoke to me, and I was glad. And so on this holiday of La Bab Duchen, I want to celebrate a feeling of gratitude. It's true, we have not been the best practitioners we could have been. It's true that we fall down, we get up, we fall down, we get up. We're human. It's true that sometimes we practice well, and sometimes we don't. And sometimes we practice deeply, and sometimes we go through the motions. But what's really true, what's the best thing about it all, is Om Ahkon Benzar Guru Pema Siddhi Hum. We are taught by the Buddhas that we are all equal in our nature. From the greatest king, queen, emperor, president, Secretary of Defense, all of us. I'm having too much fun today. We're going to have to do a lot of editing for this class. From the greatest of us to the meanest little worm, to a cockroach, to an ant, to a mosquito, that in our nature we have that same Buddha seed. That phenomenal, well, phenomenal is not the right word, is it? That primordial nature that is our true nature. The great luminous bodhicitta. Empty and yet spontaneously complete. While we may have traveled in such a way that some of those capabilities have become awakened, or else we would not be able to even pronounce Om Ahkon Benza Guru Pema Siddhi Hong. I know lots of dogs that can't. And even if we could pronounce Om Ahkon Benza Guru Pema Siddhi Hong, if we could teach a parrot to pronounce it, there is no meaning, there is no connection, and so it has some benefit, but ultimately not the same benefit that comes to us when we practice as we can practice. Yet in our nature, there is no hierarchy, you see? There's no one higher, no one lower, no one better and no one worse. And so guilt is obsolete, isn't it? Obsolete and downright stupid. Remorse becomes a tool, and gratitude and awareness become the open doors. This precious human rebirth is extremely difficult to obtain, and we are taught that as sentient beings go through the bardo and take rebirth, they could just as easily come up one life form as another. And even though we are taught that surely if you do this practice, you will achieve realization. And even surely if you recite the 7-line prayer, within 7 lifetimes you will achieve liberation, or you will achieve awakening. That's not to say that that route, even a 7-lifetime route, will be direct. Because at the time of entering into the bardo is like a liquid explosion. Light, sound, energy, vibration, one's very karmic field, which could be understood to be empty in its nature and could be understood feeling-wise to be of a vibrational quality. One's very karmic field, everything ripens at the time of bardo. And that's why we practice so hard for the bardo state. We practice to die nobly and to be reborn in an acceptable and auspicious life form. Because this precious human rebirth is extremely difficult to obtain. At the time of bardo, even if we have been practitioners, if we have been slothful, or if we have been mindless, or if we have let our merit decline, or if we have let our practice decay, or worse, if we have broken some form of samaya, even while we've done lots of practice, it all ripens at the time of bardo. All of it comes due in ways that we cannot even imagine. I actually heard a story last night that once His Holiness went to see what, His Holiness is a really he's a cool hipster. He went to see what like a dance discotheque place would be like. Of course, he went there when it was, nobody there, because it would have been monstrous if he hadn't. But he got to see, the crazy lights and the, strobe effect and loud music and crashing things and, all the light shows on all the different walls and all that crazy stuff that they have in those kinds of places. And he said, "Oh, very cool." No, he didn't say very cool. He said something like, "Oh, yeah." And he said, "This is like a bardo. This is a great place to practice." So I'm thinking, all my dancing years, they're not worth nothing. I can't say I was practicing then. But he said, yeah, it's like that with a bardo. Everything to distract your attention everything to, you know how if you're in one of those places, if you can remember that far back, your mind becomes numb or just, you're stumbling around. You try to practice under that kind of condition. That would be the modern Western version of the old Tibetan habit of going to practice on a charnel ground or a graveyard where spooks and demons and things were, because you learned how to practice your way through all of that and not even see all of that. Nowadays we have discotheque. So, and New York. So His Holiness said, this is great. It's nothing to be despised, but use it for practice. How amazing. And that's what the Bardo was like. And we should understand that if we have not stabilized our minds in this life, hello, not likely it's going to happen at the time of our death. That's not when your mind stabilizes. That is when the natural constituencies of your, I want to say, what is the word? The stuff that you're made of, elements, yeah. The elements that you're made of come unglued, and they come apart. And actually, amazingly, at the time of one's death, I think this teaching has been so given out so often that one couldn't consider it a secret teaching any longer. As you know, during one's conception in a human life, the first thing that happens is the union of sperm and egg. Did your mommy tell you that? Oh, big surprise. And the sperm is white and the egg is red. And at the time of one's death, the red bindu, or essence, which is the mother's essence at the top of the head, is that right? Top of the head, yeah. Melts and falls down, or is it the opposite? Can't remember, it's one or the other. I think it's the red at the top of the head melts and comes down, and then the white comes up, and the moment they meet, that's when it goes black. That's when actual death occurs. And that's when all the subtle inner winds are gone. And so the process of the male and female coming together and providing this life form, this genetic picture, is sort of reversed in the Bardo. And the elements that combine our body, DNA-wise, genetically, all of that mush that makes us who we are, breaks apart. It just literally comes apart. So there's no time and space perception. Indeed, there is no perception in the way that we understand perception, as our eyes dissolve, our ears dissolve, our senses dissolve, once those elements begin to come apart. And at that point, there is a perception, but it's not a linear perception in the way we have linear perception here. Today, our hours and minutes are neatly lined up for the most part, unless we take drugs, and or do a lot of heavy drinking. And definitely days, months, it's all nicely lined out, and it's not going to surprise you too much. I mean, we at least unconsciously know that we'll look different at the time we're 10 years old than we do at the time we're 40. At least on an unconscious level, we're aware of that. But in the Bardo state, it's not like that. Ripening is immediate, it's dramatic, it's without containers. It's without containers. And in many cases, one of the words that is used for the five senses are translated means like bags or containers or satchels. So our experience is contained. In the Bardo, it is not contained. It looks like a discotheque. Really loud noises, really crazy lights, really weird feelings, back and forth. I mean, there's a reason why the great masters of our time have practiced under really extraordinary conditions. We would think to ourselves, my goodness, are they masochistic or something? Why would anyone want to practice under such difficult conditions, like in a graveyard or in a cave with very little food, or under, There are many practitioners, say, in the Himalayas who learn certain kinds of practices where they learn to control their bodies completely. Then they go into the snow and warm themselves and melt the snow around them, or dry the clothing on them, which is wet. So many different ways to practice. And why would we do something so extraordinary? Because that's really how it is in the Bardo state. That's really how it is. And so if we have not taken the time to refresh ourselves and understand that this is a precious human rebirth, and we have this enormous, pretty straightforward opportunity right now to practice and to stabilize our mind, stabilize our perception. Indeed, awaken our pure perception so that it doesn't rely on these 5 bags called our senses. 5 containers called our senses. If we can give rise to this pure perception, this true view that I keep nagging you all about, then at the time of the Bardo, the experience is not being thrown about on the waves of one's karma the way it would be for an ordinary person. And that's what they call a noble death, not an ordinary death. And that's the difference. In an ordinary death, one is susceptible. One can be flung helplessly on the seas of one's own habitual tendencies and karma and patterns. And if the mind is stable, and if we take this opportunity now, and with happiness and joy and gratitude, realize that this is it. Precious human rebirth, we nailed it. And take this opportunity to stabilize, it will never happen later. It simply will not happen. I'd like for us to get away from the kind of magical thinking that we tend to adapt simply because of the way we talk. For instance, we are taught, if you say the 7-line prayer, faithfully during this lifetime, then within 7 lifetimes you will be enlightened. It's true. The great bodhisattvas taught it. But if you use it as magical thinking, then how true can that be? If you think it's like a talisman to ward away the vampires of karma, how's that going to work? Doesn't even work in the movies. The vampire comes up and says, "Oy vey, you're bothering me." That's magical thinking. And what we should endeavor to accomplish is realizing the banquet we are sitting at, realizing how blessed we are. So if we take this opportunity and break through that numbness and say, all right, this is it. This is it. There was no other opportunity like this one. If I don't give rise to the bodhicitta now and practice honestly and deeply and do something about this mind that I am, that I live in, that I'm experiencing, well, there'll never be another time like this. That is the great blessing of awakening to and realizing the preciousness of this human rebirth. And there's no time like the present because life is so short. Those of us that have gone round the bend, and I have definitely gone round the bend, I think some of you all are getting there too. I was trying to take it all myself, but I'm looking around. Got a few gray hairs here. It's time. Life's not getting longer. We're at that time, many of us in our lives, where we know there's much more behind us than there is in front of us. And so now it's time to stabilize. So you have earned this precious human rebirth. Are you accumulating the causes for your next precious human rebirth? so that you can continue on the path of Dharma? Are you accumulating the causes by which you might actually attain realization in this lifetime? That could happen too. This is the time of degeneration, although it's much, much harder. It's also the case that ripenings can occur. And this time of degeneration can turn around on a dime, one way or the other. Are we instead, hopefully not, simply accumulating ordinary karma so that we may end up wearing robes at the time that we've died, but we haven't really achieved a noble death? We haven't really achieved the certainty of a precious and auspicious next life. I'd hate for that to be the case. Because as the teachings have taught us, this precious human rebirth is extremely difficult to obtain. The image we're given is that if we could pop up from the bottom of the ocean, that we would somehow come up with our heads through a life, what do they call those things? Life preserver. Out on the vast ocean of Earth. Think about what the ocean is. We're not thinking about right off the beach. We're thinking about how vast the ocean is. If we were to come up in the middle of the ocean, what is the likelihood there'd be something there to save our lives? Very little. That's how rare this is. And so on this wonderful holiday of La Bob Duchin, we should hopefully allow ourselves to take a moment to feel joy, to know that something in us has blossomed, something in us has earned the right to recite these Vajra words, Om Ahong Benza Guru Pema Siddhi Hong, to attain the triple Vajra of body, speech, and mind, to make the way by which we ourselves might have not an ordinary death, but a noble death, in which we are immediately reborn in the Pure Lands, or in some form that one can return in order to benefit sentient beings. This is the great hope that each of us engages in. And it's easy to say, oh, I'm still pretty young. I really don't have to worry about it right now. But that is not the case. No matter what your hair colorist tells you, that is not the case. And for those of us that actually are young physically, let me give you another traditional teaching that I couldn't wrap my mind around the first time I heard it, but this is a traditional teaching. We are taught that human life, the human lifespan, is as fast as a waterfall rushing down a mountain. And I remember thinking to myself, I can't wrap my mind around that because, look, you can look at a waterfall and maybe it's been there for a long time. Like long enough to cut into that rock underneath it. But the way it's actually meant and the way you should understand it is, suppose then you're following one bucket of that water. It's exactly how our lives are. It looks like it's long. It looks like it's stable. It looks like when you look at it, it's been there a long time and it'll be there a long time. But if you follow one bucket of that water going over the falls, boom, it's gone in an instant. And in truth, that's how our lives are. Your youth and vitality and all that you hold dear, thinking that, I don't have to practice too much Dharma because I'm still pretty young, is going to be gone in an instant before you even know it. Better to use that youth and vigor to practice Dharma. Because there's something wonderful about being young and vigorous. There's a certain energy behind you. You're not complacent yet. I love that about young people. I love to hang out with young people because they keep me alive. They keep me percolating. They're not ready to give up the ghost yet. They're not ready to say, this is okay. Or I'm cool with stuff. They have this vigor and this will to, I want to make a splash here. I want to change the world. They haven't gotten to the point where, after 4 divorces and, grandchildren and 17 mortgages and back problems. Oh, yeah, and that vision, in the eye. By that time, you're saying, I'd just be happy to make it till tomorrow. When we're young, we have that great will, that excitement. So I honor that state of mind, and I beg you, before it's gone, use it to accomplish Dharma. You have vitality in you now that you will never have again. You can do practices that break my back to do. You guys are strong. Use that strength before you lose it. Because what's going to happen to all of us is that we lose the strength, then we lose the will, and pretty soon we don't realize it, but we're old and we're too tired. And by the time we're old and tired, our mind is a little unstable, to tell you the truth. If we haven't worked it before, it's hard to work it now. But it can be done. Through Vajrayana, it can be done. So what do you got left? What do you got? You got youth and vigor? Don't waste it on stupid stuff. You got wisdom and maturity? Don't dupe yourself with old people thinking. Use this precious opportunity. We are all one people, all one family. We are related. We are the same. In our nature, we cannot be distinguished. If you could look the way the Buddha looks, there's no difference. We are all one nature. And so whatever your station, wherever you are, if you own this precious human rebirth, use it. Move into a state of gratitude. What is it they say, an attitude of gratitude? Boy, I love that. I love that. That is a noble quality to be admired, because when you have that attitude of gratitude and you're aware, this is the precious human rebirth, and I have that noble birth, then every door is open to you. Every possibility is bright and beautiful. No matter what your age, with that kind of awareness and that kind of attitude, we are spiritually young, and we are capable. So I offer you that bit of insight, hopefully, on this happy day of Labab Duchen, where Buddha didn't forget his mother. And ask you to be as joyful as I feel today, and ask you to give rise to that gratitude so that you can practice deeply and make this one count. We got to stop sliding, No more sliding. Make it count. It's almost over. So we have to make it count. So that's my heart's advice to you on Labab Duchen. I can't think of anything else I would rather say to you except Oma Hung Benza Guru Pema Siddhi Hung. Thank you. Nanda.